Hi there. Have you ever wondered what reincarnation is really about? I'm a holistic health psychologist. I do soul healing work. I've been doing soul healing work for probably nearly as long as I've been doing psychological work. And I want to bring together the world of psychology and the soul so that you can understand how reincarnation works. Because although reincarnation has been talked about for thousands and thousands of years in many traditions, it is fairly new for some people to understand what it's about. And it's time to bring it back full circle to give you a very easy and user-friendly approach to helping you understand how this whole thing works. So for those of you who follow me, you know I love trees. And I am going to use some cross sections of trees that have come down in my yard that show this and illustrate this whole idea very easily and clearly, because a lot of times we need metaphors or visual kinds of things to help us understand things a little bit better and deepen our understanding of things like reincarnation, which tends to be a little bit complex for people. So I'm going to show you. This is one cross section of one of the trees that came down in my yard. I've got lots of trees around me, and I want to help you understand that. So if you look at these, this is very clear indication of all of the tree rings, all of the years, all of the sort of chapters in this tree's life. But I want to help you understand this from the idea of lifetimes. So let's start with the tree itself. So okay, so this is when the tree was just a little sapling, a little sprout. And we look at it and we look at how much that this thing has expanded, how many rings that it accumulated over these lifetimes. And I think I counted this once for this particular one. And I think there's like 40 some rings in this particular splice of this tree. So that means this tree itself was about 40 years old, give or take, when it came down. And the idea of reincarnation is that with every lifetime, with every tree ring, there's expansion, there's growth, there's learning, there's evolution. And that's why I use the word evolution so much. But think about this and bear with me. So, and this is why I like using splices that have blemishes or wounds or things that obviously have happened to the tree, because metaphorically speaking, it helps you understand the lifetimes of a person as well. So the lifetime of this tree was actually fairly unharmed for quite a while. We don't see anything that really started marring this tree. Now, granted, this is dried out, so it has split a little bit, but it wouldn't have split in sections unless there was a wound there already. So we look at this and we look and we see that this tree had a pretty easy lifetime for quite a while. We see some darkening and lightening, which means that that's the difference in the nutrition or the nutrients that that season brought to the tree. And so if you think about the nutrients that we have, what feeds our soul, what challenges us when we feel depleted, when we don't feel depleted, the years of our life when we feel like they're pretty easy, we think have everything that we need, we have all of the resources available to us, well, then we grow pretty easily. But you also see, if you really take a look at this tree started to become skewed at some point because the rings extend out further on this side than they do this side. So there was some form of stress on this tree that started to skew the development of this tree. That is the same thing for human lifetimes. So when we have some sort of stress, whether it's a very acute kind of stress, something that happens very suddenly, or if it's something that wears on us over time, it changes the course of our growth. It changes the development of who we are. So if you think about the development of a soul being stretched in a direction, having something stressful happen to it, then it is all about how we adjust to that stress. Now, trees are extremely resilient. They can bend around things, they can grow around things, but that doesn't mean that the integrity or the soul of that tree is not wounded. So I'm going to go back to this for a second and help you see. So you see the different coloration in here. So again, the darker colors were probably seasons where they were rich in nutrients, had everything they needed. The lighter ones, as it grew out, because it was an older kind of tree, it needed more nutrients to sustain its level of growth, but it obviously did not get that because obviously it lightens up over here. So you've got a lot more discoloration. You have a lot more depletion in the resources, even though this tree kept going. So here's a little metaphor I want to point out here. So, even though this tree became skewed at some point because of whatever stressors it had that pulled it in this direction, It also, it did fairly well until it started getting some of these blemishes. Now, this is one way that I try to help people understand what happens from a soul condition. If we have been wounded in previous lifetimes, what happens to us as souls as we go along lifetimes, we carry those wounds with us. We carry those blemishes. We carry those traumas. We carry those discomforts, whatever it is. And even though the tree is able to sustain, that tree also incorporates those wounds into its growth. So it basically, again, probably that's partially what skewed this tree over to the side. It starts to stretch out development. It starts to weaken the integrity of the tree or the soul if we don't know how to heal it. Now, again, trees are extremely resilient. They will keep going until they can't go anymore. Souls, on the other hand, they will keep going, but they don't function as well. They're not as resilient as trees because we are humans and we have the human condition that affects us every day. So when I look at this and I look at some of these Mars and dings and things that cracked along the way, particularly this one. So somewhere toward the adulthood of this tree, there was something that hit and hurt this tree at a much deeper level that bit into this, that harmed it. So it could have been a tragedy. It could have been some sort of something that hurt the tree. It doesn't look like a lightning strike necessarily. It could have been a bug that bored itself in there. It's one of these things where you have to metaphorically start to understand that once wounded, it will affect the development of that tree, in this case, the development of the soul forevermore, until you understand what that wound is about, what you're supposed to do with it, how you can heal from it, and really what it means for you in your development. And so the evolution of a soul is so fascinating to me because we can have wounds in previous lifetimes that we don't even know are affecting us in this current lifetime. But when you use this metaphor of the tree and realizing, wow, okay, there's no way that those wounds could not have affected us in our current development because it's woven into the development of the tree. So even though this tree continued to grow, the integrity, the personality of the tree, the shape of the tree, everything shifted and morphed as that wound had existed. Now I'm going to show you another one. Now this one, it also shows basically the really nice rings in here. The early part of the development of this tree obviously was very rich. What I do look at though is that there are some, and the coloration is very strong, but what I do look at is there are things that are embedded in this tree that basically obviously skewed the development of how this tree happened. So this was probably originally maybe an offshoot. It could have been something else that grew into the tree, but there was a major wound in this particular development of this tree that affected it for a while. Now, metaphorically speaking, we can also look at it that somehow at this point it overcame that wound. So, in other words, this tree inherently knew what it needed to do to overcome that wound. As humans, we don't always know inherently what to do to overcome wounds. But what I would say with this particular situation is that if, in fact, think about this from a healing perspective, a soul healing perspective. If, in fact, the karmic situation that caused this developmental situation was healed, or maybe the karmic connection, the contract, whatever it was completed, then you can go on to grow in a way that is not harming your development anymore. So you have to think about, wow, what are all of the things that I've overcome? What are the things that my development has taught me? How have I evolved as a result of having those experiences happen? And what is it that I can do to start to remove or complete certain situations so that basically you can get to the next level and continue your soul's evolution? So we look at this. Now, this is another discoloration. Something happened to this tree in that life cycle, this several years or the several levels or chapters of this tree's life. And again, it overcame it at this point and kept going. We have these other different discolorations. At the point that this tree came down, and I don't know that I've counted this one. This one's a little bit harder to count because of how it's how discolored it is. But this one is, if I'm looking at this now, it looks like it's about 55 to 60 rings. So this one is much older than this one, but it's also, it has a different lifespan. It has a different sense of development. Now, I will also use this crack as basically another illustrative point. This crack happened because this dried out. So this crack was not present at the point that this splice was taken. But think about this for a second. If at the birth of a tree, because this goes all the way to the core of the tree, if at the birth of a tree, it was experiencing something to begin with that weakened the integrity or weakened that affected the ability for this tree to grow, then basically it affected it throughout its lifespan. So this is another way to think about how our human condition affects us, that if there are stressful events that are happening at the time that we were born, maybe our mother was being abused, maybe there was a sudden divorce, maybe there was something else that a sudden life event or a world event that happened at that time, then it's weakened the integrity right at the core of who that soul is. That essence of who the soul is already starting out with the wound. And then what does it do? It just keeps growing, growing, growing if it doesn't know how to heal or if it has not been healed in some way. So this is why past life trauma affects us. This is why ancestral healing is so important right now. That's why we have to look back at the soul in addition to the human kind of concerns that we have, to see, okay, what else is playing a part in our ability to heal? What else is playing a part in our ability to overcome and to become conscious of what it is that is affecting us? Now, I have another one over here that I want to show you because it's really interesting. Again, this splice of the tree, I'm going to show you both sides. This side of the tree shows how dark and how rich that original development must have been. And when I show you this side, again, it's dark, it's rich, but there were wounds. There were things that happened in this tree's lifetime at a very early space in its lifetime that could have really altered its development. Now, this section right here, again, it pulled in one direction. So there's something going on. There was something going in the lifespan of this tree that affected it in a way that it altered its ability to grow. It altered its direction of growth. So it wasn't straight up. It had something that was pulling it in a direction. And so again, we have to metaphorically look at the soul from an evolutionary perspective. The soul, oftentimes we forget that one lifetime is not enough. We have so many opportunities to grow and heal, and it's up to our soul to decide whether or not we're going to come back and fine tune some of those chapters. So I'm going to go back to this very first image for a second, because again, if we look at each one of these tree rings as a chapter of this tree's life, but then use that as a metaphor that every one of these tree rings it represents a lifetime. We have to realize that all of us have a lifespan that goes far beyond this lifetime, and all of it affects us in the current life. And so sometimes trauma comes up or fears come up and people don't know where they came from because there's nothing in this particular lifetime that it sets on. People come to me all the time, either for psychotherapy or for soul healing, and say, gosh, I don't know where this fear comes from. I don't know where whether it's a fear of poverty or an extreme fear of a certain kind of animal or whatever it might be. And oftentimes I have to go back and help them understand what their previous lifetimes are to help connect the dots and help them understand their evolutionary path. When I do that, it also gives them the option to understand how to heal as well. So it's always, always, always important to consider that if something is unexplained, if something is coming up that you don't know where it came from your current lifetime, there's probably explanation from previous lifetimes. From a mental health perspective, and this is really why I try to bring the psychology together with the soul, but from a mental health perspective, we cannot fully understand our experience as humans until we understand the soul, because of the fact that the essence of who we are, that very beingness, that uniqueness of who we are as individuals, is flavored or seasoned or affected by the different experiences that we have. We have to understand that it is an evolutionary path. It's a path we take, that we have to understand that each step along the way, each chapter of that development affects who we are in the next life and the next chapter of our life. So there are beautiful human development models out there that show stages of development, but really we have to start looking at it from the soul perspective of what is the soul development? How is it that we go through the process of developing and growing, and why is it, and this is another topic I'll be talking about soon, why is it that some people come into this lifetime and they have so much wisdom already, they have so much maturity to them, they have so much decorum to them, they know how to do life. And whereas other souls from the same family even come in and they don't know how to do life at all. And that is the age of the souls. And that is a whole other series of videos I'm going to give you, but I'm going to give you some understanding of how even the soul age has to do with how we function. So for instance, and I'm just going to use this as an illustrative effect, we have this little splice of this tree that came down, and yet we have a bigger tree. So in essence, this would have been a younger soul tree. This would have been an older soul tree because it has more levels, it has more integrity, it has more chapters to it already, to the point where it has seasoned this tree. It's taught it how to heal and how to be resilient and how to move around things. Whereas when this tree came down, it was basically, a younger soul. So if it were to have gone on to the next development, it would not have had as much tree wisdom. And in my form, it would be not as much soul wisdom to take you to the next level in that next lifetime. And so, I had a huge tree come down in my backyard about 3 years ago, a huge tree. I mean, it was literally about 3 feet in diameter. I have chunks of it in my driveway because I really would love to be able to get a splice of that and also show people that, okay, these are the seasons. These are the seasons of the soul. I think when I counted that one, it was over 160 or 70 years old. It was a very, very old tree. Well, very tall tree and a very old tree in consideration to where it was in my yard. So this is part of this whole way of me helping you understand the soul better, is to give you lots of metaphors, give you lots of props to consider that might help explain these different dimensions of the soul. It is so important that we bring the soul back to life now. It is so important that we start to use the soul to understand where we are in this human condition, because this is ancient wisdom. This is, our ancients used to talk about the soul all the time. They used to live through the soul. They used to develop, because they wanted their souls to ascend. And yet we have lost all of that. And it's so important to bring that back. So that is why I use the phrase ancient wisdom for the modern soul, because I want to help you understand yourself from today and help you understand that basically there is so much ancient wisdom we could be using to understand mental health concerns, physical health concerns, how we cope, our reactions, all those kinds of things. It's just really important for us to bring this back. So again, next time you see a tree, just think about it in a different way. Think about how old of a soul that tree is. Think about what kind of wounds it has had. Think about your own life and how the chapters of your soul can take you to that next level and help you understand from that soul wisdom perspective why it is or how it is that you respond or react to things and how you see the world at large. Because the more you understand the soul, the more you will understand yourself. And in fact, the more you will understand the world at large. So thank you for listening. This is Dr. Katherine Kelly. I hope you enjoyed this video. There are many, many more to come in this Soul 101 series, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.